Hello everyone, this is Riley, and I haven't made a video in months, so I'm gonna give you a quick presentation today on my channel, which I just changed my name back to Music Master 2002 because I think it makes more sense now. So, in this presentation we're going to talk about language death and language diversity, and what it means, why it's important, and basically all those very important knowledge that maybe most of you might care about, but maybe most of you might not. Let's see from how much attention this video gets. So, let's start off by saying, what is linguistic diversity and linguistic death? So, linguistic diversity, in our entire planet, in our globe, where we have 198 countries, we have 7,000 languages on Earth. And statistics show that right now, nearly half, that is nearly 3,005, nearly half of all these languages are endangered or in high risk of being endangered. And half might not sound like a lot, but if you think about 7,000 divided by 2, that's 3,500. We are talking about nearly 3,500 languages on Earth that are endangered or at high risk of being endangered. And basically, the basic definition I can give of linguistic diversity is the languages we have on Earth, how many people speak them, and those kinds of really interesting stuff. And so I am a person that's really interested in languages. And as most of you guys watching my videos may know, currently I am studying Dutch and Norwegian. And I'll get to those reasons for why I picked those languages in a moment. But before I get into those kinds of things, I just want to talk to you guys about what, has been going on with language diversity lately. So, way back when, before we humans existed, or before any of us existed, our Earth was pretty diverse linguistically. We had a lot of languages that were growing and evolving. We had so many people speaking these languages. We had languages that are just native to so many of these people. And a language defines who you are. A language defines your culture, defines your heritage, defines where you come from. So languages might be important to some people because languages define who you are and the country you came from. And when you learn your language or when you speak your language to a good level, it's another example of patriotism. You are patriotic about your own country. And now that English has grown in influence, and a whole bunch of other languages due to colonization and invasions and wars and all these things, we've been seeing a slight decline in language diversity. And it's because a lot of people want to learn these languages. A lot of people want to learn the languages that the majority of the population speak, which is good, but here's the bad thing. You are giving up your heritage language to speak the majority or the prestige language. And that is not a good thing at all. And I'll get to that final conclusion at the end. But that leads me to my next point, which is 4 different types of language death. So, like I said, there is something called language death. And languages can either be dead or extinct. Now, languages are considered dead when you have no more native speakers. Languages are considered extinct when absolutely nobody speaks the language or knows it. So there's a difference between death of a language and extinction of a language. If your language is dead, you have no native speakers, but it continues to be used in some important form, such as a political purpose, while languages that are extinct don't get any use at all because no one knows them. And languages can become dead or extinct through these types of language death, which I'll talk about right now. So the first type of language death is gradual language death. And how gradual language death works is a population gets exposed to a prestige language that has a more dominant group of people, and they become intrigued in it and they start to learn it. Now, what makes this a language death is that the community may remain bilingual for a long time, but with each successive generation and with the years moving forward, fewer young people actually speak their traditional language, and also, even if they do, to lower levels of proficiency. And then that continues, so the proficiency level and the amount of people that speak it goes down and down and down until that community's native language or heritage language is no longer spoken. And some of them have already fallen into the path, and there are some languages that are currently falling into that path. The second language death is bottom-to-top language death, and in this type of language death, a language dies out at the bottom. Now, what I mean is, a language dies out in more casual contexts. So, like, having a conversation with somebody, or going to school, or using language in a day-to-day basis that's not really political or religious or anything of some sort. But it remains alive at the top. And now you might be asking, isn't that similar to gradual language death? Not really, because in gradual language death, what you see is the language starts to die down at the top, and the top being the religion, the religious purposes, the political purposes, the really important kind of law-making purposes. Those are the top, and then it goes down towards the bottom. In bottom-to-top language death, the language dies down from the bottom and goes up to the top. Sudden language death. This is a form of language death where all or most of a population of that community who speak that language get wiped out by some sort of disaster. It could be an illness, or it can be a tragedy such as a war or something, and then somehow no one speaks that language. Now, sudden language death, of course, is the most scariest type of language death because it involves a scenario where there might be violence involved, or there might be health crisis involved. Such as in Canada, back about 5 centuries ago, there was the extinction of the Beothuk people, which were an indigenous group of people, and they went extinct by Britain and France. And part of it was because there was a lot of killings, violence, but a lot of it was also because of illness. Britain wanted to get rid of those people, and that's how that group of people and their language became extinct. Radical language death is a form of language death where a group switches out of their heritage language to speak the more prestige language to avoid punishment or being killed or captured or any sort of thing like that. So it could be that there might be an Aboriginal land and their language, and then another country or another part of that country dominates, and there's a lot of violence going on. Those Aboriginals could give up their language to speak the prestige language just to avoid themselves being identified and possibly getting killed. So now the most common form of language death that seems to be occurring right now is gradual language death. And why I say this is because, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, we have languages that have already died out gradually, and there are languages that are falling into that path of dying. And that kind of brings me back to, my personal experience. Like, I love languages, and I love what I do with my life, studying languages every day, going on to Duolingo and doing a few exercises now and then, watching videos, practicing speaking on Babbel, those kinds of things. I love learning languages. But there's a reason for why I don't learn popular languages such as Spanish and French and Russian and those kinds of things. Even though, like, I've gotten a lot of people ask me, like, hey, Riley, why don't you learn Spanish? Or why don't you learn Russian? Or why don't you learn Mandarin? And the simple reason is because those languages don't need much attention. Now, I'm not saying that those languages are bad and those people are bad. No, that's not the point here. The point is, those languages have enough speakers already. You can probably go to like another community in your country and find a Mandarin speaker. It's literally so popular. I could literally step out of my house right now and go throughout the entire city, which I won't tell you where, and find another Mandarin speaker or another Spanish speaker because the language is so popular. But but imagine myself walking out of the house, walking down the street. Do you think I have a higher chance or as high of a chance of finding a Danish speaker than a Spanish speaker? Probably not. And the reason why is because that language is because that language is getting endangered. There's not a lot of people that speak it, and there's not a lot of people that get a lot of attention. And that's the languages that grab my attention. I want to be able to change the linguistic diversity, and there are other people out there, because I'm only one person, but there are other people out there who probably have the same views on languages as me. But it's simply because of that reason. Those languages deserve the attention that our popular languages do. They are a culture. They are a heritage. They are a country's way of communicating. And what we as a society are doing is we are taking that away. We are basically killing our culture, and that is not a good thing. I was speaking to my friend from Norway the other day. I mean, not the other day, just recently, like half an hour ago. And one thing she said to me was, I wish my sister was into languages. And I was like, okay, yeah. And I didn't say anything because I didn't say anything. And then she goes on to say, the only thing she cares about is English. She doesn't even like Norwegian. And at that point, I was like, yeah, fair enough. This is not the first time I've heard something like this. I've talked to a lot of Norwegians, and all of them basically have the same belief. They don't care about their language. And it's so sad because this is your culture. This is your country's language, and you are letting that die down on you. Like, it's very sad, and I feel like it's very sad, and yet we don't care. Because all we care about is our prestige language, English, and it's very, very, very sad. Like, I talk to a lot of people, and they're like, I take all my courses in English. And I'm going here like, I don't say this to them, but I'm going here like, seriously? You are literally killing your culture. You are killing your country as a society. You are like, you are not respecting what is important. Like, you need to take into consideration that your country is just as important as the rest of the world. And that's what I want you guys that are watching my channel to do right now. What can you do about it? I want you guys to think about a language that is endangered. Whether it's your native language, whether it's your friend's native language, or whether it's another language that you've heard about. I want you guys to think about that language, and I want you guys to think for a second all the information that you know, the statistics that you have on that language, what it's like, how many speakers there are, and why is it dying out so fast. And I want you to think about, and I want you to ask yourself this. What should I do to make sure that this language goes in the right direction? Because that's how language diversity is going to grow and become stronger. Languages have to grow in speakers, and they have to go into the right footsteps. And I want you guys to think, what can I do? What can I do to save this language? How can I spread the word about language diversity? Because language diversity is a thing that's slowly going to become an issue. You could not know, and before you know it, in the next 100 years, you're going to have, 5-10 languages go extinct or disappear. And that is not the thing that I want to see, and that's also not the thing that I want you guys to see. I want you guys to think about how important languages are to you, how important your language is to you natively, and think about what ways could I spread the word about language diversity? What can I do? Because the more people that contribute to this, the stronger our society is going to become, and the stronger the development is going to be of a healthy, linguistically diverse society. So I just want you guys to think about your native language, whether it's your friend's language, whether it's a language that you know, and kind of be mindful about how many people speak it, why it's dying, and think about, what can I do? What can I do to spread the word? What can I do to help this language, and what can I do to help this language and make sure that this language goes in the direction that I want it to go?